My wife became the bank manager, and on the same day she celebrated by sliding divorce papers across her polished desk toward me like a contract I had no choice but to sign. If I ever write the story of my life, that's where it will start. Not at our wedding day, not at our first kiss, but right there in her office, with the smell of fresh printer ink on legal paper and her pen already uncapped. I didn't argue. Didn't plead. Didn't even ask why, because I already knew. I just signed. My signature looked foreign, like someone else had written it for me. Then I walked out of that building with the strange calm of a man leaving a house that's burning behind him, smoke rising, flames swallowing everything, but refusing to run or scream. I didn't start the fire, but I wasn't about to stand there and choke on it either. As I passed the lobby, I heard her laugh with her co-workers, a bright, cutting sound that followed me out the door. Dead weight, she called me, like I was just something to be trimmed off on her way to success. What she didn't realize was that dead weight doesn't cling, it sinks, disappears, never floats back up. We hadn't always been circling the drain. At the beginning, there was something real between us, at least, I think there was. She was magnetic, sharp, ambitious in a way that made other people either admire her or envy her. She had this knack for turning every compliment into capital, every opportunity into leverage. I loved that about her once. Or maybe I just loved how alive it made her look. I was quieter, softer, the one who smoothed the edges when she came home bristling from a long day. We balanced each other. At least, that's what I told myself. To the outside world, we were solid. Dinners out on Friday nights, trips we could barely afford but smiled through anyway, photos at Thanksgiving and Christmas that we framed and hung on the wall like proof. But what people saw was just the stage set. Behind the curtain, we were already drifting apart. She thrived on control, of her career, of her time, of me. And I thrived on pretending I didn't notice, as if ignorance could be a kind of peace. For a while it worked. We floated along, living in a marriage that looked like stability but felt more like a ceasefire. And like all ceasefires, it had an end date. Mine was written somewhere in invisible ink on her promotion letter, waiting for the right light to make it visible. Looking back, the signs weren't subtle, they were screaming. Late nights at the office that stretched into dawn. Emergency meetings that no one ever mentioned again. Her phone always flipped screen down, as though my eyes might set off an alarm. Somewhere along the line, she started calling me safe, like I was a savings account with no interest, the kind you keep out of habit but never bother to check. Sarcasm became the only language she spoke to me, barbed little remarks disguised as jokes. They cut deeper than she ever realized. One night, while I stood in the kitchen rinsing a glass, I heard her whispering into the phone, telling a friend, "He won't even notice if I leave." I laughed, quietly, bitterly, not because it was funny, but because I already had noticed. I had been noticing for months. Friends started to hint that something felt off. My sister gave me looks that said more than words. Even her co-workers, people I barely knew, would smirk a little too long when I shook their hands, as if they knew they were watching the last act of a play I hadn't realized I was in. The more she pulled away, the louder she laughed. Especially at work. Once, I overheard her telling someone, "When I get this manager job, I'm dumping him. I need a man who adds zeros, not subtracts them." Zeros. That was me. Round, hollow, nothing but a placeholder in the story of her life. I didn't even fight back. Didn't try to change her mind. There's no dignity in begging to stay where you're not wanted. So when the day came, she didn't walk into our home like my wife. She walked in like a queen returning from war, victorious, holding those papers like a royal decree. There were no tears, no tremble in her hands, not even a pause to see if I'd resist. Just a signature line waiting for me, as if the whole marriage had been a transaction she was finally closing. And me? I signed, handed back the pen, and watched her smile like she'd just cleaned out the last bit of clutter from her life. She didn't even look at me when she tossed the papers onto the coffee table, just flicked her wrist like she was handing me a receipt, something I was meant to sign without reading. "It's cleaner this way," she said, calm and detached, as if she'd spent months rehearsing the line. "You'll thank me later." Her voice had the kind of finality that didn't leave space for questions. I didn't argue. I didn't beg her to reconsider. I didn't ask who had stepped into my place, or how long she'd been planning this. I just sat there, staring at the divorce papers, and thought about the job offer I had declined a few months earlier, the one in New York, with the kind of pay that could change a person's life. At the time, I had turned it down because I thought stability mattered more, because I thought keeping us together was more important than chasing a dream. But suddenly, her timing felt almost merciful, like the universe was forcing me to take a step I had been too cautious to take on my own. She thought she was cutting off dead weight. She didn't realize I had been the ballast, the thing keeping her ship upright. So I signed. I didn't flinch, didn't slam a fist on the table, didn't cry. I slid the papers back to her with steady hands, stood up, and packed a single bag. Just what I could carry, nothing sentimental, nothing that would tie me to that house, to that life. I walked out the door before dawn and never looked back. No note. No forwarding address. No trail for her to follow. I disappeared like smoke. I imagine that night she went out with her friends, maybe her co-workers, laughing into her glass of wine, boasting about how she had finally upgraded, finally gotten rid of the man she thought was holding her back. But while she was celebrating her fresh start, I was beginning mine. That very week, I called the company in Manhattan and told them I was ready to accept. I stepped into that office as though I had been training for it my entire life. Crisp suit, calm smile, no hesitation. The city became mine. Years passed. Promotions came. My name was on the door. I bought property, made investments, and built friendships with people who valued me for who I was, not just for what I earned or what I could do for them. My life became sharper, cleaner, more intentional. I wasn't the man she had left behind anymore. Then, out of nowhere, she found me, of all places, through bank records. The first message was short, polite. We need to talk. The next one came within minutes. Please answer. It's important. Then came more. 10, 20, 50, until they piled up into hundreds of unread messages on my phone. And in those unanswered pleas, I could hear it. The cracks in her voice, the growing desperation. Something in her perfect little world had gone wrong. When I finally picked up her call, I didn't speak right away. I let the silence stretch until all I could hear was her breathing, shallow and uneven. Where are you? She whispered, and there was no mistaking it. She was crying. For a moment, I just listened. Then I laughed, low and sharp. Not out of cruelty but out of recognition, out of finality. Exactly where you left me, I said quietly. Dead weight. And I hung up before she could say anything else. I didn't need to gloat. I didn't need to remind her of what she threw away or give her a speech about karma. Her voice on the other end of the line, trembling, broken, pleading, was enough. The universe had already handed down its verdict. Her upgrade hadn't turned out to be the dream she imagined. The bank had restructured, her husband wasn't the man she thought he was, and the life she built had started to collapse around her. She had let go of what was keeping her steady, and now she was drowning. Me? I kept walking. I didn't look back. Because sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's silence, it's peace, it's living a life so full and steady that the past can't touch you. When she laughed years ago about cutting loose dead weight, she never realized I was the only one who knew how to float. And without me, she had no idea how fast she'd sink.